Hello, and welcome to another Rant Rave review. Today we shall mercilessly be ranting about Gosford Park, which inexplicably won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay in 2002. Brief note, if the audio is weird, it is because this stupid microphone has been doing its looping syllables thing and destroying all my sound. So, ripperoni, this is my computer microphone. Without further ado, Gosford Park. I stumbled across this because I was Googling whodunit movies or classic murder movies. I love me some murders, as you all know. Technically, it fits the bill. I mean, it is a murder mystery. It's just not a good one, or a good movie, or a good anything. So, the basic premise is it's your classic country house mystery where there's this rich guy named William and he's throwing a dinner party / hunting party for all of his rich guests. The twist being that this story also gives plot and character to the downstairs guests. So they are also a huge part of the movie. And yeah, the main character is named Mary. She is a maidservant of Maggie Smith's, rich lady. Stuff happens. Right off the bat, they give you like 57,000 names to keep track of. And I watched this with subtitles, and I still was like, who? Who is who? What's going on? And we'll get into like how confusing it gets as we go on. But just know that like if it sounds confusing when I explain it, it is freaking confusing. I still don't know who some of the characters were. Yeah. Anyway, so as confusing as it was also incredibly predictable, which is why I feel okay spoiling the entire thing. Also, it's not very good, not worth watching. But also, like, the mystery was not really a mystery at all. Like, it was super obvious. There were parts where I was like, is this supposed to be a clue? Like, this is just showing us... What? Yeah. And yet it won Best Screenplay. So, without further ado, Gosford Park. So, everyone comes in. You have the rich people of the house, the servants of the house, and then the rich guests and their servants. So, like, they bring their own valets, their own maidservants, etc., etc. Mary is new to the house and acts as something of an expository character. And her rich lady, Maggie Smith, is awful, like, you know, doesn't care about her, doesn't treat her like a human being, but is also super mean to other people in the house. In fact, almost every character in this movie, except for like 4 of them, are just the most unpleasant people. Like, so unpleasant. Like, that was the other thing about this movie. It was, like, deeply unpleasant to watch. Everyone is backbiting. Everyone is sleeping with everyone else. Like, it's just awful. And not just the rich people. Like, it's definitely, like, classism bad. Classism bad. I hope you know that classism is bad. But the servants were, like, also awful. Like, they were just slightly less awful than the rich people. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll try to, like, explain things. I'm not going to explain it in order, because there was so much going on. There's also a million, like, side plots that I think were supposed to be red herrings, but they obviously had nothing to do with the mystery. For example, there's an American screenwriter, a British actor, and their mysterious valet, Henry, who's very mysterious, who it turns out is also an American actor who's, like, studying to play a butler. That's why he's pretended to be a valet. And they constantly remark about how classism bad, okay? And Henry is a complete sleazewad. Like, the rich lady of the house, William's wife, like, propositions him, and he's like, okay. And then he also tries to, like, get with this one maid who's, like, having a crisis, and she thankfully, like, slams the door in his face. And then, like, out of friggin' nowhere, apropos of nothing, like, Mary is lost in a house and ends up in the male servants' quarters by accident, and he's like, oh, you can't be seen up here, like, come into my room, you want some booze? And she's like, no thanks, and he, like, jumps on top of her and tries to have his way with her, and she is saved by dark-haired servant Robert, I think his name is. Like, it comes out of complete left field, and he's totally taking advantage of her, and yet he also is like, I can't believe that, like, the rich people and the poor people are so different in Britain. He doesn't have that accent, but whatever. And I was just like, what? Like, and things come out of left field a lot in this movie. But anyway, back to the 3 actors. I think that, like, they're there just to kind of either just point out the like really obvious classism theme, but I think Henry is supposed to be suspicious, and I'm like, he's not. Like, none of these three people are going to be the murderer. Do you know how I know that none of these three people are going to be the murderer? Because classism bad, and we know that William is going to get killed either for mistreating a servant or from a rich person who saw him mistreating somebody. Like, this is obvious. Classism bad. Like, that's, aside from, like, the obnoxiousness of a heavy-handed message, like, in a mystery, we know that, like, your theme is, like, this is what's going to happen. We know it's going to be a class thing. Therefore, the three Americans will have nothing to do with it. Kind of like how, ironically, in an Agatha Christie movie, you'll know that, like, none of the servants will ever have anything to do with it. Like, this is, the butler did not do it, okay? In Agatha Christie. In these ones, like, you know that it's going to be a classism thing. You know these guys have nothing to do with it. Okay, write them off. And there's so many characters. And once we get to the actual murder, I'll explain how, like, we pretty much know exactly who did it. It is not a mystery. But we'll get to that. Okay, so things come out of left field. And that we will go bit by bit. But I'm also a huge problem with this movie, which you might have noticed in my weird explanation of everybody. It's really confusing. Despite being extremely predictable, it's extremely confusing. I watched this with subtitles, and I still couldn't keep, like, half of the names straight. And there's so many faces to keep track of. And I will say, and I will confess, little sidebar, I have a real struggle with faces. To give you an idea, the movie The Departed, the whole point is, like, mob guy is infiltrating the cops, and cop is infiltrating the mob. And I couldn't tell which character was which for, like, the entire movie, so I had no idea what was happening. Like, in any given scene, I was like, wait, is he pretending? Or is he him? I don't... And then I watched the Chinese version, the original, Infernal Affairs, and one of the guys had a mustache, and I was like, oh, this is super easy to tell what's going on, because one of them has a mustache. I watched The Prestige, which, according to Wikipedia, apparently, the twist is that, like, one of them has a twin. I didn't know that, probably because I'm assuming, it's been a while, but probably in the scene where that was revealed, I probably just thought it was the other actor. Like, I don't even know. And then, my family roasts me for this one. I used to think that Robert Downey Jr. and Hugh Jackman were the same person. I don't mean I confused them. I mean, literally, I was like, you know, that actor who plays Iron Man and Sherlock Holmes and Wolverine. And to this, I mean, I know that they're different people now, but, like, I saw a still shot from Deadpool and Wolverine, and I was like, wow, he's really aged a lot since the last Avengers. Yeah, okay, so part of this is not the movie, part of it is me and my problem with faces, but part of it is the movie, because I watched it with subtitles, and, like, by the end of the movie, I could actually usually tell faces, most of the faces from the faces. I still didn't know, like, half the names. And I listen to audiobooks of, like, Agatha Christie and stuff, and it will take me a few chapters to figure out who's who, but by the time the murder happens, I'm like, I know that name is that person, and that name is that person. So I feel like this is a script problem with Gosford Park of, like, so many names, so many faces, so much to keep track of, and not in a, like, interesting red herrings that lead you astray because they make sense way, but more just, like, scattershot. There's so much to keep track of that, like, it's impossible. So keep that in mind going forward. So the setup before the murder. We know that a knife has gone missing the night before. We know that when the men were out on their hunting party, like, William got shot, like grazed from a low angle. And, like, again, like, the clunky script. This is a clunky script. For example, like, Henry, the mysterious valet, is sent by his, like, actor, screenwriter guys to go on the hunting trip with them, which we are told specifically is weird for a valet to do. And it turns out later that, like, oh, like, Henry's actually a butler, like, an actor pretending to be a butler to learn how to be a butler. And I'm like, then he wouldn't be allowed to go on the hunting trip, because if butlers aren't supposed to go on hunting trips, why would he need to know that as an actor? This was clearly just put into the script to fool the audience, to try and make him seem suspicious, Like maybe he shot William, but it didn't work because we know that he's not going to be involved in the crime. Like, clunky. Okay, so that happens. And everybody's backbiting each other and being creepy, and everyone's sleeping with everybody else. And there's tons of things that, like, I think that the screenwriter thought were, like, mysteries, but are actually just extremely obvious. Like, there's this, like, chubby scullery maid who is sitting outside smoking when a dark-haired rich guy comes late to the party, and he asks her for a cigarette, and she's like, And then later on, we see, like, some mysterious man, like, having sex with chunky scullery maid. Is it William? Like, no, it's probably the dark-haired rich guy. And then later on, like, we see her having sex again, and it turns out, it's dark-haired rich guy. What a twist? Like, obviously. And here's what's weird about that little plot line that goes nowhere, is there's a very overarching thing that we learn about, like, William has totally been taking advantage of, like, tons of his female employees forever. And yet that whole plot line is kind of like, haha, funny. And I'm like, is it? Like, he's taking advantage of her. It doesn't matter if she's willing. Like, if she got pregnant, he wouldn't take care of the baby. Like, this is, like, and I don't know if the movie knows how messed up it is, or if it thinks it's funny. It's unclear. Anyway, that comes out of nowhere, goes nowhere, and is not mysterious. Another thing that we learn. Dark-haired Robert manservant, who's the guy who saved Mary from being raped by Henry Sleazewad. That's his last name now. We learn that he's an orphan, or was raised in an orphanage. He has a picture of his mom on his dresser. Okay. We learn from old maid lady, and there's two old maid ladies, like, who are the head of the servants who, like, bicker, and, like, good casting, because it turns out that they're actually sisters, but, like, I couldn't tell one from the other, so I legit don't know which one told this story, but one of them tells the story about how William used to own a factory, and he would totally take advantage of his factory girls, and they would give up their babies for adoption. And I'm like, oh, so she's his mom. Okay. And then later on, we see that she has a picture of a baby on her nightstand, and she's like, oh, like, my baby, like, oh, he's gone. And you're like, yeah, he's Robert. This isn't a clue. This is, like, what happened. Like, this is obvious. This isn't a clue, okay? Like, this isn't a clue. I don't know why this won Best Screenplay. Anyway, okay, moving on. Other side bits that are happening, there's, like, so many people who look so similar. There was, like, a gay manservant who really wants to undress, like, the actor guy, and then I thought he was the same as the butler because they're kind of both, like, the same stature and weight, and the nice servant named Dorothy is like, oh, I'll, like, say anything you want me to, butler, to, like, protect you. And I was like, oh, she's, like, protecting him because if the police look into him, they'll find out that he's gay. Except that, no, those are actually different people. And his secret backstory that we learn at the very end of the movie is, like, he had a criminal record for being a conscientious objector during World War I. And he's also drunk because of it. And we never knew anything about that beforehand, ever. And nothing comes of it. And I'm like, that's not a red herring. A, because we know by then that he's nothing to do with the crime, because when we get to the crime, it's very obvious. And B, like, it came out of nowhere. Like, what is this? This is just superfluous information. This isn't a red herring. Like, it's so bizarre. Anyway, log that away. Log away Dorothy. Like, I feel like each character just has, like, this character trait, like, thrown onto them, and, like, that's apparently how you write an Academy Award-winning screenplay. So, finally. Oh, there's also a rich guy who's yelling at his dark-haired wife, and I legit don't know which rich guy that was. Like, later on, I'll talk about, like, yeah. So many characters, so many things happening. Then we get to the night of the crime, where they're all at dinner, and everyone's been bickering and backbiting and being awful to each other the whole time. Short, rich guy has asked William for a loan, and William is not going to give it to him. We also learn that William is going to cut off Maggie Smith's allowance. And these are theoretically reasons why he might be murdered, except that, like, it's not going to be, because it's going to be a class thing, because the movie is really heavy-handed. And blonde maid earlier, that's her name. I think her name is Elsie. I think her name actually is Elsie. Elsie was talking to William's daughter, and if this is all really confusing, like, just imagine watching this, you guys. I'm trying to make it as straightforward as I can. The daughter wants to get a job for some guy, and I legit don't know if she wants to marry him or if he's blackmailing her for the job. I think he's blackmailing her, but she also might want to marry him. Anyway, her dad didn't want to give him a job, and she, the daughter, says to Elsie, the maid, like, can't you talk to him? And she's like, why do you think I would have anything to, like, why do you think he's listening to me? And you're like, oh, okay, so, like, they're having an affair. And, okay, this is all the stuff that you need to know for the setup of the murder. So, they're at the dinner, everyone's backbiting each other. Two people say two mean things to William, who, remember, by the way, is a rapist. And Elsie, who, by the way, he has taken advantage of, is like, don't say that. Bill would never. And everyone's like, she calls him Bill. Like, they must be sleeping together. And she runs off, and he harumphs off. And it's, like, completely unmotivated. Like, it is made clear that, like, she kind of likes him, even though he's a scumbag. But nothing that was said to him was any meaner than anything else that anyone has said at all night. Like, the screenwriter literally had her say that so she could be, like, put in a tough situation and run away, and he would go off to his room and be alone. Like, to set up for the murder. That is the only reason this happened. If you wanted her to, like, lose her cool, because, like, I'm like, she's a trained servant. Like, the whole point is, like, these are, like, really properly trained servants. You don't just lose your cool. And I'm sure that tons of people have said tons of mean things about William constantly. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You should have them needling him for, like, a couple minutes and have, like, rising tension, and then she could lose her cool. Like, it's so strange and so ham-fisted and so not worthy of an Academy Award. So anyway, this is the setup for the murder. So, Elsie's in her room, William's in his study, everybody else has retired to the drawing room. I don't know what these rooms are called. A room where they're playing cards and drinking booze and tea, apparently, because somebody goes out to get milk at some point, and the American actor is playing a song. Or not American actor, the British actor is playing a song, and everyone's listening to him, and all the servants are coming to listen to him as well. Now, here's the setup for the murder. Here's what happens on screen. A maid servant who, at this point, if you didn't have prosopagnosia, you could literally solve the murder. But I was like a maid, one of the maids. Like, I can't tell them apart. They all have the same crinkly 1920s haircut that half the rich people have too. But anyway, a maid goes up. She brings him a cup of tea, and he's like, if I wanted tea, I would have asked for tea. And he smacks it out of her hand. Give me some whiskey. So she gives him some whiskey, and he drinks it. Then she leaves. Okay. As everyone's listening to the song play, and it's really funny, not funny, haha, funny like, Maggie Smith is like kibitzing, commenting about how annoying it is, like he keeps playing all this music and how obnoxious it is, and I'm like, the music, the cute 1930s songs were the only good part of this excruciatingly long murder scene that I think was so long to like try and build tension, but it wasn't. It was just long. It was like a slog of like everybody, like so many scenes of like people listening, people dancing, people playing cards, and I'm like, nothing's happening. Except Robert, the dark-haired servant who Mary likes, and who likes Mary, obviously, and who is an orphan, is like, do you want to see a surprise? And he brings her to listen to music, and then he scurries away. Other dark-haired servant says he has to go get the milk because they're out of milk. And short rich guy who asked for a loan and was denied the loan leaves the party for unspecified reasons. Okay. Elsie is also out of the picture. American actor and Henry are also out of the picture, or American screenwriter. But see, here's the thing. We know that American actor and Henry are not going to be the murderer because it's about class. We also know that Elsie can't be the murderer because we see someone walk up in men's pants and men's shoes that are clean, step out of those shoes into a pair of muddy boots in the hall, and walk up to the study. And yes, theoretically, like, there could be a woman who's dressed like a man for some reason, but that would truly be a to fool the audience reason. Like, you wouldn't change out of women's clothes into men's clothes and then change into different shoes, like, one pair of men's shoes into another men's shoes, unless you wanted to fool the audience. And even this movie isn't that stupid. So we really have three suspects. Robert, other dark-haired servant, short man, except we don't actually have three suspects because we know from earlier that one of the knives from the previous dinner party went missing. And the person who has changed into different shoes has gloves on, and they get a knife that they hid in a trash bin. Meaning this is premeditated, meaning it happened before, or was planned before, Short Man was denied his loan. Meaning that he cannot be a suspect. We also know it's not going to be the dark-haired servant who went to get the milk because he doesn't have as much screen time as Robert, and I don't even remember his name, so it has to be Robert. Okay, so we basically know that it's Robert. So Robert goes upstairs, and he sees the rich guy who's, like, sitting at his desk, and he takes a knife, and he stabs him, and the rich guy goes, huh. And I was like, was he already dead? Like, did the maid poison him? That's exactly what happened. And so when you have the audience being like, huh, is that what happened? That's not a good sign for a mystery, okay? Like, yeah, like, he was already dead because the maid poisoned him. And again, if you didn't have prosopagnosia, you could put the whole thing together. Now, I was just like, a maid poisoned him. I don't know which one. One of them, because, yeah. So, at this point, everything is pretty much on the table, okay? So one of the rich people goes up to get William, sees him, screams, the murder's happened. Okay. Enter the official police, who don't need to be in the movie. So, like, this won an Academy Award, you guys. Stephen Fry is the police inspector, and his friend, Constable Dexter, or whatever the frig, like, Officer Dexter, whatever they call him. And Stephen Fry is like, my name's Inspector Tom. It's Inspector Tom. Lol, every time he tries to say his name, someone interrupts him. It's a running gag. It's so funny. Why? And he's super dumb. Like Inspector or Constable Dexter is like, sir, there's muddy footprints here. There's a broken teacup. And he's like, oh, let the servants clean that up, lol. And he, like, grabs a decanter to, like, drink a thing. And he's like, oh, those haven't been dusted for fingerprints yet, sir. And he's like, oh, whoops. And, like, incompetently stupid from a completely different genre of mystery. Like, this guy doesn't belong in this movie. Why did this win a friggin' Academy Award? Anyway, he then, blah, 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 he interviews a bunch of people, and eventually is like, oh, the servants can leave because none of them had anything to do with William. You get it? Because of classism. Classism? Lol, classism. Anyway. Ignore the official police. They have nothing to do with anything. So, at this point in the movie, much is revealed, most of which was already revealed. Like the fact that chubby scullery maid was, like, having an affair with black-haired rich guy. Who cares? We do learn at this point, again, that, like, the butler had a drinking problem because he was a conscientious objector. Came out of nowhere. Nothing comes of it. Who cares? Short man who didn't get the loan, the rich guy, was heard saying, like, I'm glad William's dead and everyone's better off for it. And his servant overheard him and told the cops. And he's all gloomy that the cops suspect him. And he goes downstairs to eat jam in the kitchen. And he sees Dorothy. Dorothy, one of the only pleasant characters in the entire freaking movie. The one who was going to protect the butler, because she loves him, apparently. Nothing comes of it. And I don't know if he is the same person who was, like, yelling at one of the dark-haired rich ladies before or not. I don't know. But anyway, I know he had a loan. That's all I know. And he's like, man, you can't get anything in life. It's so unfair. And some people get everything and others get nothing. And, like, you work and you work and you get nowhere. Like, what do you think? And she's like, I think you just have to love. You have to love even if you're not loved in return. Because this is an Academy Award-winning screenplay. Like, completely unmotivated dialogue. But, like, you know, that his character trait is I didn't get a loan. Her character trait is I'm in love with a guy who doesn't love me. Those two things go together. You can have dialogue A and dialogue theta, and clearly one follows from the other, right? Sure, I don't know. And he is like, oh, you're right, love. And he runs upstairs and he kisses, like, the dark-haired lady, rich lady who wasn't being yelled at. And I don't know if it's his wife or not. Like, he either kissed his wife or he kissed a lady who isn't his wife. And, like, nothing comes of it. And it's super confusing, and like nothing ever gets solved with the rich daughter's blackmail and or paramour. I don't know. Anyway, unmotivated. It's bizarre. Like, so many loose ends. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, the final, like, solving of the mystery. So Mary is talking to Elsie, and Elsie is like, oh, I'm gonna get, like, fired because everyone knows I have an affair with William. But, like, I didn't mind him. Like, he talked to me sometimes, even though it was just because his wife wouldn't talk to him. And, like, what was it he always, like, I'll probably get a new job. What was it he'd always say? Like, carpe diem, seize the day. And I must have missed something, because that phrase apparently makes Mary know that Robert is the murderer? I don't know why, but she does, and she goes to his room, and she's like, tell me you didn't kill him. Tell me you didn't kill him, Robert. And Robert's like, why wouldn't I kill my own father? Mwahaha, bum. We already knew this, by the way. We just didn't know that he knew it. So I guess that's, like, the twist, is he knew that William was his own father, and the reason he stabbed him was because he obviously raped his mother. Like, okay, that makes sense. But, like, yeah, we knew that it was him who stabbed him. So anyway, she's like, well, he didn't, I mean, like, he was already poisoned. But the police did find out that, by the way. The police did find out that William was already poisoned before he got stabbed. We know this. And he's like, well, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, I don't remember how she figures this out, but the next day, she goes downstairs and she sees the old maid, head maid, who is Robert's mother, and she's like, why'd you do it? Like, why did you poison William? And this is the only, and again, we knew this because she was the one who poured his drink. So, like, it was obviously her. This isn't a mystery. Like, this isn't a mystery. So anyway, she's like, because I'm a perfect servant, and perfect servants always know to anticipate things. And that was cool, because she's like, when they're hungry, we have food ready for them. When they're tired, we turn down their beds. And I anticipated that Robert wanted to kill William for what he did to me. So, like, I anticipated it and killed him first to protect Robert. And I was like, legit. That is actually, like, a legitimately interesting motive. The only good thing in the entire movie. And then we get back to ham-fistedness, where Mary leaves, and then, like, headmaid is, like, weeping, and the other headmaid who comes in, they always bicker, who's secretly her sister, who was also at the factory and also got impregnated by Williams, but didn't kill her, no, not kill, didn't give up her baby, but the baby died of scarlet fever. Log that away. And she's like, well, you just protected me. Oh, yeah, she's like crying. She's like, oh, my son will never know me now. And she's like, but he's alive and that's what matters. And I'm like, A, were you planning on telling Robert that you were his mother? And B, like, you know who he's the valet of. You can just write to him. Even if your estate is broken up now that William is dead and the servants are scattered to the four winds, like, you know who he's the valet of. You can write him a letter. Like, this is dumb. This doesn't make any sense. But anyway, the film ends where everybody leaves Gosford Park and Mary says goodbye to Robert and nothing comes of it. And Maggie Smith is like, oh no, do you think I'll have to testify at the murder trial? I would hate for someone to hang on my word. And Mary's like, and what good would it do anyway? The end. Yeah, it's an Academy Award winning screenplay. According to Ebert, it's 2 big thumbs up. I just don't know. Anyway, I cannot personally recommend Gosford Park because it's really confusing and really predictable and extremely ham-fisted. But that's all I have for today, so au revoir.